It's a pretty nasty uprising at Citigroup yesterday. Shareholders voted, 55% of them, against this pay package for top executives, including Vikram Pandit. Anthony, tell us what that's all about, why this is a pretty big deal.
Well, it looks pretty odd to start with. I mean, it's not as if Vikram Pandit and his top 4 lieutenants have been paid a huge amount of money, maybe a little bit more than they should have been. Vikram got slightly more as a percentage of net income than more successful CEOs at JP Morgan and Wells Fargo did. But it's not that bad. It looks like actually what they're doing is looking back to what happened last May when Citigroup decided to give Pandit a rather nice retention package.
Which would sort of look like almost backwards looking in the sense that he had only been taking $1 a year as part of the crisis. And
because don't forget, he came to
making
Citi,
up for lost time.
Well, the reason they gave it to him was that he came to Citi from Old Lane, a hedge fund he'd set up, which Citi paid a vast amount of money for, and he was about to be paid the last $100 million or so last summer.
Right.
So they come up with this wonderfully structured retention plan for him, which frankly he doesn't need. It's not as if they're paying a poor guy lots of money to stay.
Right.
But it was quite wishy-washy in some places. So if you make sure we have a nice culture, or that you develop a good team, we'll give you anything up to $16.5 million.
Right. And shareholders didn't like it. They spoke out.
So it seems. There are a couple of advisory firms that said, don't vote for this. One of them said because of this.
And they carry some of the big institutions.
Well, the important thing to remember is these votes are not binding. They're advisory. Companies can ignore them, of course, at their peril from a PR point of view. But
they have to have the votes.
Have to have the votes
under the Dodd-Frank.
Don't have to listen to the shareholders about the pay. Now, the dangers are not only from a PR perspective, but these votes are attracting lawsuits. When companies lose the votes, people are suing nonetheless, even though they're not required.
If the companies don't follow up on them, you mean?
If the companies
What's the basis for that? Because if they're not binding, then what are these shareholders saying?
The shareholders are saying, look, we know we can't force you to do this, but it's clear evidence that you guys have not carried out your duties to us, to other investors, and you're wasting corporate assets.
Now, Richard Parsons, who's the leaving chairman of Citigroup, has maybe aware of that kind of at least for now gave a little bit of positive lip service to
he said, look, it's a serious matter. Obviously, the board and the executives are going to look into it, and it could well. I mean, what can they do at the moment? If it's purely the retention package they look at, regardless of whether Vikram actually meets the targets or not. And let's not forget, one of the targets is really simple: earn $12 billion pre-tax in this year and next year combined, just on
pretty low hurdle
on the best part of the business. So forget the Citi Holdings business that owns a lot of the drudge they've got. They made half of that in the first 3 months of this year. So they're already doing well. So what they could do is say, okay, even we already have the ability, we the Citi board, to say no to giving you your retention bonus, even if you hit those targets. So they did build themselves a bit of a backdoor if they need it. Otherwise, for this year's pay, well, I mean, I doubt they'll go back in and restructure it. I think they could cut the stock options a bit.
I think it's important to plaintiffs' attorneys about how these companies respond to these votes. I mean, if they do respond, if they are taking steps, if they're talking to shareholders, the lawyers tend to back off. It's when they don't respond, when there's a negative vote, that the lawsuits come. Now, none of these lawsuits has been successful because pay, as we all know, is largely within the ambit of the director's discretion.
But they're out there and they're dangerous. Well, more banks are going to have to face these votes in the coming weeks, and we'll be back with more Breaking Views tomorrow.